I'm here with Chris Riley, the Senior Manager of Developer Relations for HubSpot. This is Bits Bants. My name's Jade Mitchell from Catchy. We're so happy to have you here today, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. And as I was saying, I think as we were prepping, this is one of my favorite things to do. So the opportunity is great. Fortunately, these days, we don't get a lot of chances just to sit and do chats anymore. So
just casually kind of shoot the shit. So one of the things I really love doing is trying to explain to my parents what I do for a living. And so my first question would be to you. You're at a dinner party, you're chatting with people, and you tell them that you do developer relations and they're not in the tech industry. How do you define what we do to that audience?
My gosh, you would think that this would probably be one of the easiest questions to answer. I think that I'm probably fairly guilty of just avoiding the question. It's changed a lot since I've been in the industry, and I, even before it was called developer relations, before it was tech evangelism, even, and I kind of centered around product marketing, sales engineering. I try my best to come up with some sort of analogy, and I will tend to focus on when you are gaining confidence in something, you don't want to hear from somebody who knows nothing about it. So if you're a doctor, I guess one of the recent conversations was with an actual doctor. I'm like, if you're a doctor and somebody's trying to talk to you about new procedures or new ways to do things, and they have zero experience and they've never been a doctor themselves and they've never even been in the industry, how likely are you to receive that information? And then I tend to get into this long-winded explanation is that in the area of knowledge work, which we are in, hopefully I don't have to explain what that is, but sometimes I do end up having to explain what that is. In that area of knowledge work, our expertise is really critical in the work that we do. And so to build confidence, you need to hear from folks that share that same level of expertise and can talk the talk, and can help you get from point A to point B as seamless as possible, whatever that project or thing you're trying to accomplish is. Can't say that ever actually, I've never actually really figured this out. I've never actually figured out the elevator pitch. So the true honest answer, the vast majority of the time, I tell people I'm a software developer. That's a fib. I know it's a fib.
It's
but
not
I tell a lot of, not completely, but I basically say, yes, I'm a software developer. I lead an engineering team. What do I lead? I lead a developer advocacy team who are also engineers. So essentially, it's not a complete fib, but that's usually the way it goes, if we're honest.
You describe yourself sort of in your personal tagline as a bad coder turned DevRel.
Yeah.
How exactly did that become your tagline?
And I'm actually shocked that tagline has persisted for, oh my gosh, probably 15 years now. Really think about it, talk about bad hygiene in terms of keeping things up to date. So I started my career as a software developer. I love software development. When I was in college, I got a computer science. One of my degrees was in computer science. I focused on AI. And what's interesting about that is comparing that time to now, actually not a lot different. And I could explain later what the actual technical differences are. But I was very passionate about it. But at that time in computer science, this was pre-coding camps. This was, it was highly theoretical. And I was a great architect. I was a great algorithmist, if you want to use that term. I was a really bad coder. And when I say really bad coder, it was more for lack of patience. I very much am somebody who want prototypes. I want to get to feature complete. I could kind of care less whether it has bugs or not. I just want the thing to do what I expected it to do and then move on. And that's not great when you're trying to be more precise. And so, as always in my career, I've kind of lacked that level of precision that would make me a really good coder. So I was here in Colorado at the time. I had my own startup. It was OCR engine that I ended up, I'll say sell. It's not that glamorous. It was an acqui-hire to a larger OCR company in California called Abby. I moved there and I started still in the software engineering. But as I moved into a bigger company, I realized that my aptitude was more front of the house, more customer facing. So I really liked helping prototype solutions for our customers. And so what was interesting, even before Guy Kawasaki came out with his book, Art of the Start, which was essentially the beginning of the tech evangelist role, which eventually became developer relations, I was kind of skirting around it. So I was in product marketing, sales engineering, support, direct sales. Like I was doing all of these things and none of them like fully landed. And so I was very fortunate that tech evangelism and then DevRel became a role, because otherwise I don't know what I would be doing right now, because I was not great at any one of those things. Like as a product manager, I was really good at the ideation of functionality and like defining features, but I was not great at the follow through. And I could kind of go through each of those roles and tell you, you know, where I was a bad sales engineer turned tech dev advocate and so forth. So that is why I say that. I will stand by it. However, the thing that's kind of scary in today's world, and I was recently telling my boss, is that all the things that made me a bad coder are now gone. And so I don't know what that, like, it's really interesting to see what that means for myself. And it's requiring a lot of discipline, actually.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I sort of understand that to an extent. You know, I work on a totally different side of the house, but we all always have directors and strategists and then sort of end delivery people and, you know, proofreaders and QA people. And now so many of those roles have either been compacted into the same role or are being, you know, made a lot more efficient with AI. And it's interesting. Yeah. You know, I think a lot of people cut their teeth on some of those roles, on some of those tasks, and are like, this actually isn't for me. I don't have the meticulous nature to kind of be an end code shipper, but I've got some pretty good ideas up front. So, you know, that's where the teamwork and that sort of thing begins. On that topic, are there any sort of like pivotal moments or mentors that you've had in your career that helped you towards sort of the DevRel sphere?
You know, I maybe not specifically DevRel, but owning my craft, which I think, you know, everybody should kind of think of their career as something that they're architecting, or like maybe even kind of treat it like a product that you're nurturing and developing. And some of the areas that I had to really work to develop was around interpersonal skills, communication skills, etc. And I had several mentors along the way. Joe Budelli, who was my boss over at Abby, Don McMahon, who was a boss's boss through several roles that I was through, were really helped me. They were salespeople. They helped me with the communication side. And then on the technical side, you know, there was a lot of folks that weren't directly mentors but I looked up to, and kind of, well, one of my co-founders in the OCR company, Arthur, he certainly was helpful from getting a lot of technical acumen. But, you know, I definitely have honed in on industry personalities that you can kind of see their trajectory and think about like how they got where they got. And one of the most recent is Karen Ng, who is our product leader here at HubSpot, who's the most amazing product leader that I've ever intersected with. And then there's several people from my days at Splunk. Doug Merritt, the CEO of Splunk at the time when I was there, is somebody that I really looked up to because he was my CEO during the COVID time period. And that's where people's humanity came out in a lot of ways, especially in the area of business. So I did look a lot to folks in industry. And then I had some direct mentors that helped me, not directly in DevRel, but in tangential things to help refine what I do.
That's awesome. I mean, none of us do this alone. And I think there's always, a part of kind of what we were saying is, every successful project requires people sort of playing to their strengths and managing their weaknesses and learning from the people around you. It's one of the best things in this industry, I think, is just you're surrounded with so many people from different backgrounds and different experiences with different skills. And even if it's not something that you feel a natural affinity towards, you still end up learning a lot. Speaking of that, was there a specific moment or a specific project where you were like, oh, developer relations? Yeah, that's for me. That's what I want to do. That's me now.
So the term itself, developer relations, kind of caught me by surprise and wasn't the biggest fan. Like a good techie curmudgeon, anytime there's a new term, I tend to be like, you're just renaming a thing. Eventually, I came around and as I was saying that, like, been doing this long enough that, and I have a blog post on this, like the history of DevRel really started with Guy Kawasaki's book, Art of the Start. He wrote that book after it was published and due to kind of his relationships in the Silicon Valley. So Guy Kawasaki was considered the original tech evangelist. Every VC startup in the Valley would take that book to their founders and go, you have to hire a tech evangelist. So tech evangelism became a role at that time. Then eventually we realized tech evangelist, maybe this isn't the right term. Okay, now we're tech advocates or developer advocates. And then it became multidisciplinary because developer advocates were dealing with documentation, they were dealing with support, they were dealing with kind of professional services, application quality kind of things. They were dealing with community and building community. And so DevRel became the umbrella around what was originally tech evangelism became. And so I was still referring myself as a tech advocate at that time. And when DevRel, I don't know exactly what year DevRel became a term that kind of stuck. It was right around the DevOps days, maybe 7 years ago or so. But and then I fully succumbed to the term and I said, yeah, I'm DevRel. But for me, it wasn't a role change. My role actually hasn't changed since the beginning of when I got into tech evangelism.
That's interesting. I think, the nomenclature of the thing can help you. Well, I don't know. I also get I'm a writer, so I do get very tied up in the naming of. So, how is the developer marketing audience different? And I guess also, how is it more rewarding in a way?
It's that also, I think, unfortunately, is kind of a terminology challenge. Let's just start with marketing in general. Marketing has always been a very close peer of mine in any organization I've worked. Prior to HubSpot, I've only been in developer first companies. So a developer first company is a company that the developer is not just the veteran of the technology, they're also the customer of the technology. They are the ones who are going to ultimately end up paying the bill. And then at HubSpot is a developer plus company, which means our end customer is not the developer. The developer enhances or customizes our product for the end customer. And so it has a twist because marketing at a developer first company is marketing that already understands developers. Marketing at a developer plus company is a company that understands end users, the business end users first and foremost. And so marketing has the avenues or a lot more tools in their bag to get content and promotion out the door. And they're a critical partner of DevRel. That doesn't mean that the relationship with marketing is always seamless. And I think, unfortunately, there is a nuance to developer related content that a lot of folks just don't understand. And it goes back to what I was saying before when I try to explain my role, has to do with domain expertise and how you communicate. Where marketing tends to be more of a let me tell you what's good. Developer content is let me be a steward and help you get to what's good, not tell you. It's not a dictation so much. It's more of a like, how do I help you on this journey? And that's how you create the strongest relationships with end developers. So sometimes it takes some work and some like internal therapy to make the relationships work well. But I've always had a really strong relationship with marketing. And it's different depending on who we're working with. So if it's a campaigns marketing, demand gen marketing sort of scenario, I think back to my days at Splunk, where I used to work with a partner named Emily internally. And we had an amazing relationship where it was this back and forth on like, she had a campaign to run, she had budget, she had goals. She came to us as advisors on copy and content. Like when somebody clicks the ad, what should they get so that they're not annoyed? Because that's one thing that you have to combat a lot with developers. Then you have product marketing, which is the next closest partner in your relationship there. Your hope is that the product marketers that you're working with, they don't have to be developers, but they have to know when they don't know. And they have to know some of like the general speak. And we have just an amazing partnership with Melissa and Ricky here at HubSpot, where we do that, where again, it's a really seamless kind of back and forth. It's not combative. It's not don't step on my toes kind of interaction. Like at HubSpot, everything developers.hubspot.com is run by my team, but there's a lot of content that's coming from product marketing that we are helping facilitate. They help guide us on high level messaging, because when you're in developer plus marketing, connecting to the broader messaging is really important. I think one of the things I find myself repeating to folks a lot these days who get super sensitive about their domain of work is that we all have way too much work to do. Like we can't be protective like that. Like we need to work together. And in the biggest time where that doesn't work is when you don't have shared goals. And so if you don't have shared goals, you have to figure that out first.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that grow better is one of the things that HubSpot's kind of known for doing. And it sounds like that's, the shared philosophy that you bring with a lot of your colleagues. Would you say that that's fair, with regards to developer evangelism?
Yeah, I do. I think there's been times where we've thrown out the phrase "build better to grow better," and that is feeding into like external developers need to build better solutions so that our customers can grow better. But I do. I really sometimes it's hard. Politics is a thing. Anybody who says politics isn't a thing, and I would argue anybody who says they don't like politics, I don't know, I may want to challenge them on that. But I tend to really focus on over a long time horizon, like things are generally getting better. And it's about stewardship versus ownership. And so with my team and internally with my cross-functional relationships, I focus on stewardship, which is, in my opinion, grow better.
Absolutely. You mentioned the courses that you developed for the DMA. I'd love to hear more about that. What was sort of the driving inspiration behind that?
Well, maybe the first core driver is just like hearing myself talk. But yeah, I think what I've noticed in DevRel in particular is one, developer relations tends to not be great with their cross-functional relationships internally. And two, they tend to be really awful. I'm not going to even say not like they tend to be really awful at explaining why they do what they do. And so, in addition to like being good at my day job, it's important for me to take what I've learned in growing my craft and try to spread that more widely. And so I did 2 courses, one focused on developer journeys, and it helps align metrics and the relationship between DevRel, developer journeys, and marketing, essentially. And then the other one is just on content, period. Like the content pipeline for developer content is unique, but it's also nuanced. So like, a lot of times people don't think about the curation step of content. And I really emphasize how important it is to put a lot of energy in your curation step, even before you write an outline, to understand what it is that you're going to write. So you're not just like doing it on a whim, which is what most organizations do. So it was important for me to get that content out there. I enjoy the experience of doing it. And I'd say I feel a little bit behind in trying to get more of this education out. Because I did finally launch a website after I shut down my developer marketing agency and didn't have a web presence anymore. But I have not been writing for myself to write for the industry in a while. So maybe I can use this episode as a guilt factor to get back to it.
That sounds amazing. Well, we're looking forward to reading whatever you write when you do have enough time, and I think bandwidth to look at that.
Oh, great! Well, now, Jaden, now it's really the pressure's on.
Now it's real. Now you have a deadline.
Accountability is important, so that's okay.
End of the month. I'm joking. Obviously, one of the things, in addition to kind of just your own personal fulfillment and seeing the success of your peers, having that sort of cross-department collaboration happening, I'm going to bring this down to a really sort of brass tacks, which is how do you, or what KPIs or metrics or just ways of kind of, I think, taking a pulse of the room, would you say you measure the success of developer relations?
Yeah. And that, I think therein is one of the most challenging questions, both in the course, and I have a book on developer advocacy as well. We define some like top level metrics. It's embarrassing. I don't even know what the title of it is. Something. Look up Chris Riley. You'll find it. There's actually two Chris authors. So Chris Tazi, who worked with me at my developer marketing agency for a while, and myself on developer advocacy. But there are a few metrics that I can throw out there. Like these are really solid metrics that you should work towards. But a lot of times it also depends on how the business measures itself as well. So where I would start is the overall framing. Like first, number one principle, and I learned this from Karen, or I was aware of it, but she put it in words, which is metrics are a proxy for the outcome we seek. That's an important thing to think about, because if you try to make metrics 100% accurate, you may never report on anything. Number one. Number two is you have to think about what you want to have happen as a result. Like, what do you want to measure? What is the actual outcome you want to measure versus what most organizations do? What is the data that we have that we can put in a chart? Is how most organizations think of it. So that's the first kind of layer. Then the next layer is there's different types of metrics. I tend to not like volume metrics. So things like views, things like clicks. I tend not to like those, and especially in developer relations, because, for example, in marketing, you want to create content that gets the most views, which means that content has to be generally appealing to the largest possible audience that is relevant. In developer relations, you want content to provide as much value as possible, which means exactly the opposite. Because to provide the most value, you have to be the most detailed. So I will tell people, and they'll be like, are you really? Seriously? I'll say that you can never be too specific with developer content, because when you consume it, I want to be able to read it and then do something after. And I'm more likely to do that the more specific the content is. The more specific the content is, the fewer readership you will get. Now, you could make the argument you'll get more clicks because it added more value, whatever the CTA is, but it's not going to be a huge volume. But everybody who reads it is going to get value. So I like to focus on value metrics. And there's a few value metrics that I like to look at. The first is pipeline touched. It all depends on your organization, or customer dollars touched. What this means is my content was consumed by these folks who are in our pipeline, or my content was consumed by these folks who are already paying customers. That means that they got value from my content. Now, the other thing that folks don't realize is that in DevRel, our roles tend to also support retaining customers. As the more value the more questions you can answer, and the better you can steward folks, the more likely they are to stick around because they have more confidence in you. And so customer dollar retention, I know these are like fancy words for something that's not all that complicated. It's basically like the number of customers that basically didn't leave because they consumed your content. Now, some of this is really hard to measure. And that's where the next challenge comes. Then the next metric I really like is time to hello world. So this is how long does it take somebody to go from, I know you have an API, I know I can do something to it, to a hello world type integration. Now, DevRel may not be influencing all aspects of that. And if you own documentation, like my team does own our documentation, you are a part of that. So that is a great metric, but it might be a shared metric with product. The other one that we look at is the funnel from our content to action and product. So you consume content and you do something. That one is extremely difficult to measure. But these are kind of where my favorites are, and I pay a lot of attention. You know, we have a lot of day-to-day metrics like content volume, amount of content we publish on specific topics, things of that sort that are for us. But those metrics are the ones that I like to communicate back to the business.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I think that's, you know, as you said, so many of us are drowning in data with regards to data points and that sort of thing. It helps to focus on what's actually driving our objective. And as you said, specificity, relevance to your audience. Those are the things that take you beyond like, oh, we hit this many clicks or we got this many eyes on the eyeballs. Like those don't matter. What matters is, as you said, that actual outcome for your user, whether that's retention or whether that's adoption. On that, and please feel free to kind of take a minute. I don't want to get into any NDA trouble. Are there any projects that you're currently working on, you've recently released, you're super proud of? I know the Mintify integration was very exciting recently.
Well, thank you. Thank you for catching on to that. The docs migration project was a really big deal for us. And you can go and kind of see the quick video where we talk about that a little bit. So we migrated from an in-house docs platform owned fully by product to a third-party platform with Mintify. It was a migration not only in content, it was a migration in terms of ownership and responsibility as well. Because at the completion of this, my team is now responsible for. We've always been very tightly coupled to docs content. But now my team is not only coupled with docs content with our tech writers, it is also owning the platform itself. And so that is a really big deal. And we maintain a separate roadmap just kind of for that. I'm very proud of that. It was an interesting project. One of the things that came up that was the most fascinating to me is how polarizing light mode and dark mode is. At one point I said, you know what, let's default to dark mode, because kind of the feedback I was getting from folks was, we love dark mode and it was my favorite. And if you want to go visit our docs, you can go and look at it. But I quickly found out how the folks who like light mode really like light mode, and please do not default to dark mode. I think folks are more accustomed to turning it on than to turning it off. And so we reverted on that, but that has been an amazing project. A lot of opportunities have come our way of building towards Horizon 2, Horizon 3 type solutions. And my team has been innovating in a lot of really interesting ways around like code quality, how to better provide I'll try to avoid using the term support, but how to better provide advice to our developer community via, um, we have some interesting stuff coming around there, and then that's been really fun. Talking about how to, with the documentation, make sure that information is available in our MCP server. If you're familiar with the MCP technology that folks are using in their development environment. So we've gotten really into the weeds in projects like that. Like, I think we have a tendency to look for like shiny and new a lot of times. Like, a lot of the best practices that I've shared here today, a lot of our work, or my work, is in refining those and making sure, like, for example, we have a big project to reinvent our content pipeline and bring AI as a big element into it. Rethink about how we curate content, given the fact that we have new sorts of data from our documentation. So these are all really fun kind of day-to-day stuff. I think a little less glamorous, but it's exciting to me because just solving problems is exciting to me. So
I think, iterative rounds are sort of the unsung hero of a lot of innovation. I always think of the English Tour de France team who kind of slowly reduced the size of their tires by 1 millimeter at a time to try to optimize for what is the best size or thickness of a bike tire. And that sort of thing always comes to my mind, where I'm like, the difference of a millimeter or two could really be phenomenal.
Right.
So it's not
that's a great
whole new platform or something. It can just be.
That's a great analogy.
Well, I usually ask people for the rose and the thorn of their career, if you'd like to share that with us. And usually these are things that have been sort of core memories, where it's something deep from your early career, where it was like, wow, that was a hard lesson learned, but I'm glad I have it embedded in my bones now. And then again, something that was like, really enjoyed that. That was something that told me I was on the right path.
I know, and this is probably a little bit more philosophical. When I went into management, I had a good 6-month period, which was kind of an existential crisis of, I'm deciding I probably won't be the one speaking as much. I probably won't be the one writing as much. Like, I won't have that opportunity as much because that's really for my team. And when I got on the other side of that, I realized that people management, productivity through humans, essentially is one of my most favorite things. And so the rose is when you see that happen. So when you help somebody who's approaching burnout get on the other side of it and continue forward, like, that's extremely rewarding. And my passion on emotional health, my passion on neurodiversity, it all is in the same category, which is, and maybe this sounds a little bit too objectifying in a way, but like the productivity through our emotional state, and how we are more productive depending on how we're feeling and how we're operating. And I just love being a manager. And yes, I loved being a developer advocate. I enjoyed, I basically had 3 kind of waves of technology: DevOps, big data, and OCR, enterprise content management, that I was an advocate for, that I've said had some amount of notoriety. But I don't have that anymore, and I'm okay with that because I love people management so much. The thorn, I will say, for advocacy, because it exists today. It may always exist, but part of this is realizing that it may always exist. A lot of times I tell my team that developer advocacy in particular is a "I told you so" kind of job. Developer advocates tend to have a platform-wide perspective, where a lot of times you're working with folks who have a very siloed, either product-specific perspective or audience perspective, and that allows us to see things in a different way, where you can kind of see the problems coming, like they're just coming right at you. And we can state this, we can give warning signs, but when you're an org that operates so differently than other orgs that are more established, it's hard to get the audience for that sometimes. And so the thorns is knowing that a lot of times you see what's going to happen, it's going to happen, whether it's going to be 3 months or 6 months, and you can't do anything about it, is hard. And I think that my workaround or my hack for that has been relishing in the journey of watching the evolution of things. But I know for developer advocates, that can be really hard because the personality for a lot of developer advocates want solutions now, or if they know there is a solution, they can't understand why it hasn't been implemented or listened to. And it can create a lot of anxiety and angst. And if you're going to be successful in this role for a long period of time, you just have to get over that. And so I think that has been the biggest thorn in my career, because it's been in every role, every company I've ever been in, that sort of situation.
Really interesting. It sounds like it's sort of two sides of the same coin, really. On one hand, you're empowering people to move past things, but also understanding that this is something that just the nature of the job and the nature of people who are attracted to this role are going to struggle with. You said something that was quite interesting, and I've actually got 2 questions left. I want to come back to the fact that you said that you're passionate about neurodiversity and sort of an advocate for neurodiversity, and definitely something that we've learned from doing a couple of these episodes and speaking to people who go into dev marketing and become dev advocates, is that the diversity really is what makes this count, and having that empathy and having the ability to kind of listen actively to build communities. Anyway, I'll stop talking, but I'd like to know more about that from your perspective.
We do something at HubSpot called Epic Week, which is a week where it's our internal conference for product and engineering, where we educate each other. And there were 2 Epic Weeks back to back. I did sessions on neurodiversity. The last one was the one kind of recorded, and I'm used to speaking a lot, but like that at that time and that topic, it was one of the more challenging things for me to communicate on. And that's exactly why I felt like I had to do it. So I got my official diagnosis for ASD with both types of ADHD about 2.5 years ago. And when I say official, it's kind of a known thing, but it wasn't until the official diagnosis that I felt like I had the right to maybe like deeper conversations about that. And at the same time, I was going through a divorce. So, and they're somewhat related and maybe not directly related at the time, but I went through such a wave of not necessarily like recognizing my own neurodiversity. I already recognized it. It was more deciding what I was going to do with it at that point, like going over to the next side of it, that I became very passionate about emotional health in general, I'll say. And then specifically, what I see as superpowers for the neurodivergent community and the ADHD, if that's the term you want to use, ADHD, autism, and ADHD, because it is such a rich community in terms of creativity and thought, and it's like it's yin and yang. Like on one side, it's just absolutely amazing what these folks can come up with and do. And like when I think about my team and I think about more internally in HubSpot, the amount of innovation that comes due to neurodivergent personalities is just amazing. But it also causes a lot of struggles in relationships, in management, in productivity, and so as I've started to accept and gain some of the skills and some of the tools to address that, I've really enjoyed sharing that, because again, it's kind of a part of management. And I also do a lot of mentorship as well. And I mentor for the Disability In Alliance, and helping folks get to that point where they're like, oh yeah, like, like they think about it less as being broken and more as like, how do I hack the system so that I can favor the good stuff and then the challenging stuff doesn't become as impactful. It's never going away. And anybody who implies that it's going away will have a very serious debate with me, because it's not, and it shouldn't, and it doesn't need to. I'll just give you one quick example. I know I'm going a little bit long here, but like one of the things, especially for folks who have ADHD, and the caveat here is your organization has to be willing to embrace this. But for the ADHD brain, you go so hard and so fast sometimes that sometimes your brain tells you you're done. Like it just straight up tells you you're done. And folks who experience that phenomenon usually experience it in a very internal way where they become very critical of themselves. Like, I don't know what's happening to myself. I have no more energy. It's basically like my brain shut off. And when I have conversations with those folks, I go, your brain did shut off. Like it's supposed to shut off. You're done. Like you need to go and stop for a bit, because until you fully decompress from a crazy amount of overstimulation that you imposed on yourself and the organization and your work imposed on you, you will not come back an all-star again. So if you want to get back to the all-star state, like you got to go shut down. And that's hard for people to accept, especially in our society, to allow themselves to shut down. And I try to, when I talk to people about it, I try to make it more about the fact that like your body's telling you, you just did all of this stuff. You got to stop for a second and you'll come back to it. You have to have confidence you will. So that is one big lesson.
No, it's wonderful. And it's wonderful that you're advocating for that, because I think, the whole like, oh, it's 9 to 5, it's Monday to Friday. A lot of brains don't work that way. There are 7 days in a week, 24 usable hours technically, but a lot of brains don't stick to that. I mean, honestly, that schedule's from the Industrial Revolution, which is almost 200 years old. So
that's really interesting, actually. There's a blog post in there somewhere.
Absolutely. I've got one last question, and it's maybe a little bit silly, but while I was stalking your LinkedIn profile, I noticed that you were a jazz band kid. I want to know
how on earth
of your jazz background ever informs some of your DevRel. Just like, if you're trying to come up with conversations, if there's anything
interesting.
Like working with a band where you have like, all right, it's your turn to play the trumpet. I don't really listen to jazz, obviously, so.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't either. Like, I love music, and I think actually it ties into the neurodivergent conversation in an interesting way. Because in addition to ADHD, I'm dyslexic, and there's 2 forms of dyslexia. There's auditory and visual. And when you have auditory dyslexia, a lot of times music itself that has words, you don't hear the words. You just hear the sound patterns of the words. And so I've always kind of primarily enjoyed music for sound patterns. And I think that like things like techno and music scores, and like was recently on a call where I was talking about Ramin Djawadi's music, who is the composer for Westworld, like how some music becomes very interesting. It has only indirectly influenced my specific role. For better or worse, I tend to be a very task-oriented person. And so I don't, unless I allow myself opportunities like this, so that's why I love them so much. If I'm interacting with my peers, it's very kind of task-oriented. But one of the biggest therapies that I've had and I continue to have, and when I talk about when your brain is done, you need to sit down and like, you need to shut down, is playing piano. So I went from jazz band to playing sax to being a pretty avid piano player. And so I do it for myself. I don't do it for anybody else. I zone out for hours playing potentially the same song on repeat over and over and over again. But what is amazing about it for me is that if you've, and I'm sure this is true for any instrument, but like if you've been a pianist and you've learned a song to the point that like your fingers play on their own, it's almost like you are both the instrument and the listener, because you're not even controlling it at a certain point. Like you're feeling it and hearing it. And it's not something that you're like really thinking about doing. And that is probably the best way for me to address overstimulation, which happens to me a lot. So I would say, I know I manipulated your question there a little bit, but more in terms of like music as a form of therapy and playing the piano as a form of therapy for me has been a really big deal.
Chris, thank you so much. I really appreciate
Thank you.
Everything that you've told us has just been fantastic. This has been such a fascinating interview. Is there anything in our last few minutes that you'd like to finish with?
If folks who listen want to hold me accountable for actually getting some of the content that I have in my backlog out the door, my new site is devrel.dad. And that's where I hope to publish a lot of this content.
All right. So Chris Riley at HubSpot on LinkedIn, or devrel.dad. Really look forward to reading some more of your blog posts as you come around to writing them. So thank you again.
Thanks for your time.